Hello. On Tuesday, it will be exactly a year since 27 million people tuned in to watch the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom announce to its citizens that there will be a national lockdown. And I vividly remember the time, particularly since our daughter was up in Scotland on the final year of her degree, and there were frantic conversations back and forth as to what we would do. In the end, together we decided that I would drive up to Edinburgh through the night to pick up my daughter from her halls of residence. And she bundled some stuff into a couple of bags and we drove back home. And our lives, as well as the lives of everyone else across the United Kingdom, have been affected by what has happened over the past year. We have collectively had to sacrifice our freedoms. We've sacrificed our movement. Our everyday lives have changed. Those special moments with family and friends, the things that so many people had planned to do, have had to be stopped or postponed or just sort of like given up. As a church in the local community, like many other communities, we didn't celebrate Easter as we would normally do. We did not have our plans, our holidays fulfilled, for we were all sat at home. Christmas was, for most people, a non-event. And family life has been disruptive. For many people, they have lost their jobs. Others have not been able to work at their job for almost a year. Tragically, 130,000 people and counting have lost their lives within the UK and around 3 million across the world. We know about those things now and we look back at those events. But had we have known about it then, what we know now, would things have been different? Would we have done things differently? Would we have prepared in a better way as individuals, as a society, and indeed a wider world? There are so many things that we have discovered as the time has gone on when, were we to look back upon that year, it would have been the what ifs and the if onlys of our lives. In our gospel reading today from John chapter 12, the reading is headed, Jesus predicts his death. And each of the gospel writers record the events of Jesus saying these things. It's very significant that each one should record it in their own way. But you notice that they write the account down as if it was to be in the future and yet to happen. And yet we realize that they are recalling the events and the story many years after they had happened. They've already been through it, they've already lived it, and they've come out the other side. And now they tell their story, they tell the story to the world of what happened. During the Gospels, Jesus uses word pictures to tell his story. He proclaims the gospel and he talks about farmers and seeds. He talks about light and dark. He talks about water, about bread, about sheep and shepherds. He talks about doors and gates. And the whole time, what begins to happen is that people start to make connections. They think about what he says and they're making connections with their everyday lives. So grains and wheat, they understand. Light and dark, they understand. And yet here in the passage, he talks about being lifted up. And all of a sudden they respond, in the Lord it says, the Messiah will be lifted up. He will live forever. And so they make these connections. And what Jesus is attempting to do here is to tell the disciples, to tell his followers exactly what would happen in the coming days and weeks. He tells them the outcome and he gets them to react to it, to prepare for it, to get ready for what is to come. If you go back over the past year, I wonder what things would we have done differently? How would we have prepared for what has happened to us and has happened and goes on happening over the coming year? What will happen? How could we have prepared? Do you remember those early days when people were frantically running around buying toilet rolls and pasta and the supermarket shelves were like completely empty? Queues would stretch for miles as people gathered around the block waiting for their trolley to be washed and for them to go in the store. Things were radically different. As a follower of Jesus, then and now, it is about sacrifice. It's about the sacrifice of a Saviour who gives his life. It is about a sacrifice of those who seek to follow him in their own lives. And Jesus here is an element to which he says to his disciples and his followers, I'm not going to promise you a blessing to come. What I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare you to receive it. And there's a big difference. He doesn't promise that blessing. He prepares them to receive it. And he goes ahead of them in words, in pictures, sharing with them exactly what is going to happen. He says to them, it's not going to be easy. And as my followers, you are not exempt from the suffering that may come. I'm not giving you the blessing. I'm preparing you for the blessing. There is a difference. A seed goes into the ground and it dies, but it will grow. Where there is darkness, light will shine. Where there is death, resurrection will follow. Jesus will be lifted up and all people will be drawn to him. I'm not giving you a blessing. I am preparing you to receive that blessing. We know exactly what will happen over the next couple of weeks as we prepare ourselves, as the church prepares itself, as society prepares itself for the unfolding events of Easter. And because of restrictions and guidance, I realize that things will be different. And yet death and resurrection will happen, for it is the story of Easter. It is the story of Christian faith. Jesus predicts his death and he tells the disciples the outcome, and he wants those same disciples to get ready. They are not promised a blessing, but he's preparing them to receive that blessing. I know for each of us, the if-onlys of life gives us that opportunity to look back and think about the circumstances when things could have been and should have been different, and where we perhaps will have gone on a different pathway. As the days and weeks unfold and together we acknowledge and celebrate Easter, understand that Jesus has walked this way before. We have walked this way before. Through that experience, that pain and suffering and sacrifice of death, only to discover the resurrection that is to come. We do not know the outcome of our lives, and we are not promised a blessing to come, but Jesus gets us ready to receive that blessing. Receive from him today. Thank you very much.